Why do we make vows to others but ignore the promises we need to make to ourselves? Do realise the longest relationship you'll ever have is with yourself. Yet most people treat themselves worse than they'd treat a stranger. Studies show that people with high self-compassion are not only happier but have healthier relationships. So why aren't we committing to ourselves first?
I Love Lucy actress Lucille Ball once said, "Love yourself first, and everything falls into line." So why is it sometimes so hard to love ourselves? We all have days when we feel less than great. But when low self-esteem becomes a long-term problem, it can damage our mental health. So it becomes important to seek help to potentially find the source. Poor self-esteem can stem from an unhappy childhood, poor performance in school, mental illness, disability, or a lack of support system.
Self-esteem has long been used to assess the quality of a union. High self-esteem results in greater happiness over time, with the reverse also being true. Couples with high levels of self-esteem are more likely to engage in activities that strengthen their relationships.
There are numerous individual problems that can cause issues in your relationship to your spouse. These problems can come in many forms. The most common of individual problems that result in issues in one's marriage usually have to do with emotions and feelings. Many times a spouse will become depressed and will stop communicating to the other spouse, resulting in marriage issue, even though the reason for that person becoming depressed has nothing to do with the other person. Many times these emotional individual problems have something to do with one's self-esteem. When one's self-esteem gets low enough, they will start relating differently to those around them and cause rifts between themselves and their loved ones. Usually these emotional individual problems that affect one's self-esteem have something to do with how one feels about one's appearance. Many times, for example, women will begin to have low self-esteem regarding their looks and weight, especially if they just recently had children. In fact, most often these emotional individual problems affect women more than men, simply because women are more sensitive to their emotions. There are individual problems that will affect men more than women, however. For instance, believe it or not, men are actually more prone to depression resulting from lack of work or other employment. This is because men see themselves as the providers in the family, and when they are unable to provide for their families, they feel that they are not living up to their potential and will become depressed. Oftentimes, this depression is a worsening cycle, because the worse the man feels about not providing, the even less likely it is that he will be able to find a good job and stick with it. What makes a man's individual depression even worse is that he will usually not open up to his wife or anyone else about how he is feeling, which results in him feeling even lonelier and depressed.
The association between relationship quality and individual happiness is quite complex, with researchers grappling to determine whether happiness leads to quality relationships or the vice versa. The same conundrum exists when it comes to happiness and marriage. Does marriage lead to happiness, or is it that generally happy people are most likely to marry? Wives play a greater emotional role in marriage, thereby influencing their husband's psychological well-being than the reverse. For instance, wives have a greater effect on husbands' happiness and self-esteem than the reverse. Counter to the lay beliefs that men are independent and self-reliant or draw their self-worth from their relationships less than women, the overall findings suggest that husbands tend to derive self-esteem from their wife more than the other way around. However, husbands have minimal association with their wife's self-esteem. The benefits of psychological well-being arising from marriage are less pronounced for husbands with stay-at-home wives compared to those with working wives.